Joy. Welcome to Sankofa Video Books and Cafe. We've been here on Georgia Avenue since 1997, right across the street from the illustrious Howard University, HU.
You know.
I know that's right. I'm a double love right here, okay? Tonight we have a very special event, and I know you all are no stranger to these ladies on stage, so let's give it up for the authors of Laid to the Side. We have the editors, Dr. Afia and Billy Shaka, Dr. Danielle Apuko, and one of the contributors, Dr. Yele Echile. Y'all, I was not about to mess that up. So tonight we're going to have a discussion about what Dr. Afia is known for, hair. Let's be real now. Like, natural hair is a very important part of the Black experience, especially Black women. Reading and learning about psychotherapy, reading and learning about the impact of how people look at our hair on our mental health is very eye-opening. And you don't realize it, but you've probably been impacted by your hair your whole life. Yeah. Straight up. Like, I'm sure you've had at least one story from grade school where somebody said something about your hair and you was like, dang, why I gotta be like that? But these stories are these are why we come together, because there is healing within these stories, and this is why we have to have Dr. Billy Shaka come back all the time, because she's gonna keep telling us about these hair stories and our trauma, and we're gonna learn, and we're gonna keep growing and healing in that. So welcome these ladies tonight, and let's open up this amazing discussion.
Greetings, everyone.
Greetings.
I gotta work on my crowd interaction, but before I speak, may I have permission from an elder to begin? Thank you, Dr. Cook. So I like to vibe off of energy, so I'm gonna need all of your energy tonight, because I flew in from Boston and I'm feeling a little sleepy, but the vibes in here are strong. So I wanna work on practicing various African languages, because I need someone to talk to. I need you all to be able to speak to me so we can have community. But I'll do it based on the places that I've been to on the African continent. So I'll greet and I'll have you repeat after me just so we can have a vibe, right? Call and response. The first time I went to Africa, I went to Ghana. And there amongst the Kantri-speaking people, we would say, Wohotase. Wohotase. Very good. Impressed. The next time I went to Nigeria represent. And I stayed with the Yoruba family, and we would greet by saying, Bawoni. Bawoni. Perfect, you have the tones. The next time I went to Kenya, and there we would greet in Kiswahili by saying, Habarigani. Habarigani. Remember that from Kwanzaa? Okay, the next time I went to South Africa, and there amongst the Zulu-speaking people, we would say, Sawubona. Sawubona. But we're in DC. How do we greet here? What's up? How do we say it?
Hey, Mo.
What do we say?
Hey, Mo.
Hey, Mo. Okay.
Hey, Mo.
Okay, say that. Hey, Mo.
Hey, Mo.
I'm so excited to be here. Sankofa is a very special place for me. I came here as a graduate student, as a refuge, a place that I could think deeply about African culture and history, learn about Black psychology, things that actually weren't being taught at Howard, where I thought I would get that education, but this supplemented my education by reading I think there's a whole Black psychology section. Christina, where is it? Over there? Okay, the Black psychology section. Sociology, yes. And so to think about, this was my classroom. This is where the lecture hall. I heard people like Dr. Frances Cress Welsing speak all the time and talk about white supremacy, racism. She was very consistent in talking about that topic. Or would hear Baba Oduno. Who in here has ever met Baba Oduno? Do we know who Baba Oduno is? If you ever met him, he was literally a giant amongst men. It would always say, there is no culture without agriculture. Right. So to even think about just the the ancestors that are in this space. So I feel so blessed to be here, and especially with my academic besties. So to give a little context about this book, Laid to the Side, it's an opportunity for us to really give voice to things that have gone unsaid. I don't know about you all, but I never learned anything about my hair at school. Did you all? I don't know that, but did we think about hair at school? Yes, every day, all the time. And so for us to be able to have conversation, so I would love your participation. I'll ask questions, but of course, with co-authors here, we'll be discussing. So, Christine, do I say next slide or how to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next slide. Wait, how do I?
Yeah, no, we got it. We got you. Next slide.
Okay, since it's on here, did you see the book cover? Is it not gorgeous? So this is actually designed by Kristen Worlery. She's an artist in Maryland and a social worker. And so during the pandemic, she spent a lot of her days creating beautiful Black art of Black girls. And so following her Instagram, like, this needs to be on our cover. The beads alone speaks to Black girls and hair. Like, beads are loud, right? And so I see your beads back there on the locks, right? Okay. So to even think about that does not make this be silent. So I wanted to give a quick review of some Black girls maybe you heard about negotiating hair in school and the media, whether it was Boston twins who were 15 years old, Deanna and Maya Cook, that got detention for wearing box braids. So because they got detention, they couldn't play in sports, they couldn't go to the prom, all from wearing braids in their hair. Next slide. Next slide. Or Sierra Walker, senior high school in the Bahamas, threatened to suspend Chasia Delaveau for wearing an afro. So in the Caribbean, she was going to get suspended for wearing an afro to school. Next slide. Or maybe you've heard of Zuleika Patel in South Africa. It was against her school's policy to wear an afro or wear natural hair to school in Africa, right? And so she was able to organize over 20,000 people to change that policy at her school. Next slide. Or maybe you've heard of Promise Sayers. A 10-year-old from Nashville, Tennessee went viral for wearing an afro to school despite ongoing bullying from her classmates. Next slide. Or maybe you've heard of Marion Scott, an 8-year-old from Michigan who was denied her school photo because of red extensions in her hair. Do you remember in Picture Day, they used to give those little tiny combs? What was that about? Give you a complex. You couldn't get it through your hair, right? Next slide. So these trending examples of customary, I'm going to say it just because.
Madam Professor.
Trending examples of customary discriminatory practices target Black girls at school through their hair and demonstrate how policies manifest as passive and active forms of repression, surveillance, othering, and marginalization. We got to have the receipts, the references, right? Next slide. Clearly, Black girls' hair are sites of political struggle, positioning psycho-emotional demands on them to anticipate, diagnose, critique, and hopefully dismiss attacks on their aesthetics in school. Next slide. So this article was called Brushed Aside, African American Women's Narratives of Hair Bias in School. So this was written by me and Dr. Danielle Pugo and edited by Dr. Yeli Chile, published in the Journal of Race, Ethnicity, and Education. So this is a peer-reviewed journal article. You can cite us, and Billy Shaka and Pugo 22. Thank you for the 2019. You know it takes some energy to get published, right? So this was the academic basis, but we realized not a lot of people are reading these articles, right? You have to have an institutional sign-in to get on the database. And we wanted to translate what this research said into something that could be sold at Sankofa, right? So that people could actually touch and understand and connect to the research a bit more. Next slide. And with this too, I know I have a lot of words on here, but sometimes you gotta have receipts, right? So Johnson and Bankhead charged practitioners working with women and girls of African descent who intend to have a culturally based on respect and value must understand that part of getting to know their client or student may mean exploring the meaning of the hair to the individuals they serve. Who in here plans to serve or does serve Black girls? Okay, so y'all need to understand hair, right? And even if you don't, this is a part of the work too. Next slide. We're gonna go to the next slide because this is a little bit too charged. But I want us to acknowledge sometimes that we have a bit of hair trauma. So this is something that I've been exploring. It's a deeply distressing or disturbing experience related to related to hair. But recognizing that hair can actually be a big part of the way people experience physical abuse. Who in here, if you feel comfortable doing so, has ever been hit with a brush on their head or a comb? Who in here has been burned with a flaming hot piece of metal, maybe on your face, your ear, your neck? All right, this is the majority of people. That might be physical abuse. We don't always categorize it in that way, but we need to even think about why is this happening and the intention. Or emotional abuse. This could be if you were criticized about your hair. Has anybody ever been teased or criticized in terms of their hair appearance? Or even there could be sexual abuse. I was speaking with someone who's opening up a cosmetology school in New York for women who have been sex trafficked, and so teaching them the art of cosmetology. But a big part was literally grooming, that older people would come take these young girls to get their hair done so they would look older. So that can even be a part of sexual trauma as well. Or neglect, not having your hair properly taken care of, and Yelly has a really good story about that. Or emotional neglect. Maybe if you weren't complimented and told you were beautiful growing up. These can all be factors. Or even thinking about things like household dysfunction, whether a parent had mental illness, that can impact how your hair was taken care of. Or if you had an incarcerated parent, that impacts hair. If your mother was treated violently, how is she tending to your hair in a certain way? Or abusing substances, or even divorce. Maybe on the weekends you're with one parent, and the weekdays you're with another. How does that impact the hair care process? So really fusing hair into these experiences of Black girls. Next slide. And I want to be clear that the brain is a culturally sensitive organ, meaning that our social environment interacts with the brain's chemistry. So here is, I guess, considered a healthy brain versus on the right is a brain that has experienced abuse. So our brains can literally shift and change depending on the experience we've gone through, but our brain can't tell the difference if it was something hair related or not. So we have to really look at this from a holistic perspective. Next slide. And this is where psychotherapy comes in. So one of the major areas of study that all of us are involved in, because they're psychotherapists, is having a lay health advisor model with stylists and barbers make mental health assessments and interventions, having therapists based in the salon and barbershop space, having salon-based and barbershop-based group therapy, having psychoeducation materials and workshops in that space, or having web-based interventions. And so laid to the side is actually a part of a healing tool, a healing methodology specifically for schools and parenting. So next slide. So I want to give a little origin story behind this book. So in the fall of 2021, after I had retired from being a professor, I started a writing group, and in this writing group, we would meet every Friday to have something called Friday Night Write. And with this, there would always be a prompt that we would have a synchronous writing session. And one week, the prompt was, what is your earliest memory of your hair? Does that come to mind? Do you all have earliest memory? So thinking about your earliest memory of your hair, we wrote for about 20 minutes, and then we would have a discussion where people would read some of their writing. But people cried, people laughed, people yelled. There was so much emotion in these stories that in that moment, I'm like, I think this needs to be a book. So this is part of the origin. So I would love the two of you to share an excerpt from the book about your early hair memories.
Do you know what you're going to read? I'm going to read a bit of my own narrative here.
We might call on you all to tell some hair memories
presentation here. So I'm thank you for that, by the way. I've probably been to like 6 of these presentations, and I always feel like, okay, I'm definitely learning something new. So I want to share, and even talking about early memories, I am a Louisiana native born and raised, and so a lot of the cultural experience and what it means to be a Southern Black woman is very near and dear to how I began to shape my symbolism of hair as a young girl. And so in the book, I write about my mother specifically, who was the primary caretaker for my hair, and how my mother always talks, when she was growing my hair, used to tell me, when I was pregnant with you and they told me it was going to be a girl, I immediately started praying. And one of the prayers that I had was that you would have long hair. And she's like, I prayed 2 things, that you would be incredibly smart and that you would have long hair. And so I talk about that in the book, but also in terms of how the sort of rituals that we had to undergo in order to make that happen. And so I share a recipe in the book, which I still to this day don't know if it works or not, but hey, my great grandmother's hair was down to her butt, and supposedly she used this every day, but then I found out there were some other cultural things in her lineage that probably was more the reason why her hair was so long and beautiful. But so I found that as one of the core memories, and I didn't really think about it in terms of how it was shaping my identity until I got to college. And so that's when I really started thinking okay, hair is a pretty big deal. And it didn't dawn on me how big a deal hair was until I shaved my hair off in college. And so I had a little boyfriend, and so and his reaction to my hair was like, oh, I don't know, I don't know if I want to be, seen with you with your hair like this, I don't know what this means, because at the time, there was no robust natural hair community like in the 2007, 2008. I'm dating myself, but there was not the robustness wasn't there. I think there were a few people on YouTube or whatever, a few people just sharing secrets on Tumblr or something, or MySpace. Facebook, anyone? But aside from that, there really wasn't. So you kind of were on your own little island, and you wanted to go into that realm, and you just sort of face the consequences. And going home in Louisiana, hair and whatever, your proximity to being white is everything. I mean, in the South as a whole, so if you get rid of your hair, it's almost as if folks are saying, so you're just gonna be smart. That's gonna be it. You're just gonna be. Okay. So I think a lot of not really realizing how that sort of conditioning impacted me until I started, being a part of studying and talking to other women, and then just coming to my own realization. And I do want to share a bit about that journey. I think I'm going to start with the summertime, because it's summertime and it's very hot in Louisiana right now, and here too. So starting with a memory. Those of you who have the book, it's page 47. If you don't have the book, you have an opportunity later to get it. So chapter 6 is growing hands / more hair. There are 3 things I vividly remember about the summers of 1997 and 98. One such memory was the peculiar scene of my mother hunched over the kitchen sink, blinking back tears at the news of Princess Diana's sudden death. Mm-hmm. She was making dinner, and she blamed her sniffles on the raw onions she was cutting. The other thing I remember about the summer was the vexing heat wave that seemed to claim someone's life on a near daily basis. The annual fan drive put on by the local news station for those in need was really no match for Louisiana's heat stroke-inducing dog days that continued well into October. But what stands out the most about the summer of 97 is watching old MTV Jams episodes and deciding that my back-to-school hair would be inspired by Janet Jackson's Together Again music video. Watching the cultural celebration of African-inspired hairstyles and Together Again gave me the courage to ask my mother if I could have Janet Jackson ponytails for my middle school debut. Dating myself, y'all. Despite not being allowed to watch music videos in the first place, I still asked. And to my surprise, my mom agreed and set up an appointment with my regular hairdresser, Miss Greta. So although Miss Greta was a small town stylist, she was doing hair in my, rural one-stop-like town in Louisiana, she enjoyed a pretty robust clientele. So if you found yourself in Miss Greta's chair, it was likely that your mother, aunt, or grandmother had sat there too at some point. I started my hair journey with Miss Greta in the first grade, and she had what we call in Louisiana growing hands. The old folks called it growing hands because people like Miss Greta were gifted with the power to revive the hair and overall spirit of anyone who sat in her chair. It wouldn't take long for Miss Greta to have your hair shoulder length, then back length, then tickling your tailbone. Miss Greta didn't believe her clients couldn't grow long hair. She simply believed they'd not met a beautician like her. So, on the day of my back-to-school appointment, Miss Greta broke her usual salon welcoming protocol by asking me about my hair, what I've been up to that summer, and then instead of doing what she usually does, asking me about my day and whatnot, she greeted me with a stack of Black Hair Sophisticates magazine. Who remembers that? It's still popping and hype hair. And she told me, look through these and tell me what style you want. While she was walking back to the shampoo bowl, I already know what style I want, I said, trying to speak over the water spray from the shampoo bowl. Did my mother tell you? I want the Janet Jackson ponytails from the video. Miss Greta turned off the faucet and walked towards me, sitting in the waiting area of her salon. Yeah, your mother told me about the style you wanted, but they're not going to let you wear that style at your new middle school, so I hope you pick something else. I was crushed. But Miss Greta was right. A few weeks prior to that, I remember sitting under the dryer, ears burning, when Miss Greta, her phone conversation caught my attention. I had to redo Little Ash's cornrows yesterday, she said, using her shoulder and cheek to cradle her cordless Radio Shack phone, who remembers those, while also using her free hands to maneuver the rat tail comb into a sculpting tool for her client's finger waves. Yep, the school said it was a handbook violation. She squirted some Lotta body setting lotion into the palm of her hand and continued smoothing the client's waves, first around the hairline and then towards the nape. Her movements were precise and intentional. Whenever I saw Miss Greta performing finger waves, her long, slender fingers always made me think of a spider spinning its web. Can you believe they made her take it down after paying all that money to get them done? And reflecting on this exchange, I was reminded of the unspoken and sometimes overt rules Black girls like us had to navigate. Consider, for instance, Louisiana's Teen Gun laws. A stark example of my state's history of blatant racism and violence against Black women's bodies. The laws were not just about controlling Black women's hair, they were about policing our very bodies and existence. So I'll stop there.
I'm gonna keep in line with the theme of, keep in line with the, you turned off, okay.
Have it.
Hi. Okay. I'm gonna keep in line with the theme of an early memory, and this is chapter 2, Strong and Soft, my relationship with my hair. And so this is literally my earliest hair memory of getting a relaxer for the first time. And I'm 6 years old in Chicago, Illinois. And it's not just the South, where our proximity to whiteness in terms of our hair textures is like, the presiding and the ruling attitude. But
most people from Chicago are from the South.
yeah, we're all Mississippi and Alabama.
Yeah.
Definitely includes my family. Right. So I'm starting on page 25. I remember the stylist grabbing through my thick natural hair and telling my mother that once it's straight, it would be long. But that my sister and I'm a twin, by the way. My sister and I have the hair of 2 people on each of our heads, so she wanted to use something stronger than a kitty perm to attack all of the super thick, coarse, virgin hair we had. And also she wanted to double charge my mom, because on the side. Like, so that would end up being quadruple charged. So, in any case, this was my first time hearing the word coarse used in reference to my head. It felt negative, even though I could tell that the stylist was trying her best not to make us feel bad about our hair. It would not be the last time I heard that word. Inevitably, the stylist asked our names, and then came the conversation about us having an African daddy. This must be the cause of all the thick hair, was the general consensus in the salon. Other stylists and patrons had sort of tuned in to what was going on with the two of us, since I guess twin kindergartners with funny African names getting their first perm was a novel thing. This kind of curiosity buzz was a regular thing for my sisters and I, but at 6 years old, I was not yet accustomed to it. It felt like we were under a microscope during that whole experience. There was a weird mashup of feelings circulating around the salon. The affectionate cooing about how cute we were, the mild revulsion about how thick and plentiful our hair was. We had sideburns too. And the related fascination, pity, about us having a direct blood connection to Africa through our names. I felt uncomfortable because all of this swirling around, and because of our mother's somewhat defensive energy when the questions and comments we received from the other women became borderline insulting or invasive. I can never thank her enough for her efforts to protect us emotionally and physically from harm, but her stance almost seemed to draw attention to how different we were. And then came the actual physical process. The heavy, greasy petroleum jelly being slathered around my edges, and then the white cream, first applied between parts near the scalp. It almost felt cooling at first. Like sour cream right out of the refrigerator. And then it wasn't. That prickly burn that quickly turned into pure burn took my breath away. I remember shaking and crying and asking to have it rinsed out. I remember the stylist gently asking if I could keep it on a little bit longer so it could take, with a frustrated look on her face. I remember feeling my hair getting floppier, more shaking and tears. It also ached my heart to see my sister with her white, creamy hair slicked up, feeling the same way I was, with tears rolling down her cheeks, pacing the salon floor with a big cape on. I remember the rinse and relief. What a feeling. She couldn't get that stuff out fast enough. I don't think we were able to withstand the relaxer as long as she would have liked, but I do remember that her hair was definitely straight. Feeling it on my neck for the first time was kind of a proud moment. It felt long. It was long. It also felt alarmingly flat and dead. Both of us were given a half up, half down hairstyle with the bottom bumped under. I remember looking into the mirror the stylist handed me and noticing slick edges for the first time. I beamed with pride and relief. Now I looked like most of the other little black girls at school, and all of our cousins who tried a few times to give us slick back hairstyles with gel and grease. Our American cousins. I remember a general feeling of approval in the air at the salon. Now there was one less thing to be teased about. I'll never have the words to describe my mother's facial expression when she saw our hair fully straight.
Wow.
Ooh.
It seems like you all were vibing with their stories, is that right? I wonder why that is, right, in terms of these shared experiences. And I think what makes Dr. Danielle and Dr. Yelly's stories particularly special is that they have studied these topics as researchers and have taught classes related to Black girlhood and Black womanhood. And so I feel like the level of detail and attention really spoke to this African diasporic connection to other Black women navigating the meaning of hair psychologically, emotionally, with family, in schools, with the media, and all of that. But I'm mindful that you all must have stories too. So I do want to give a little space right now. If you would like to share your earliest memory of hair, is there anybody in here who would like to disclose? No pressure. safe space, informed consent, confidentiality. Is there anyone who'd like to share a hair story with us right now? No pressure. Okay, Christine. All right.
Okay, y'all. I had a couple stories, but when you just did that, the bump, the bump, my God, the bump. I used to go to Miss Pat. I'm from New Jersey. I've lived here since 2011, but I'm from Jersey, and in Jersey, that's getting your hair done by a Black person is probably the most consistent Black business that you're ever going to experience, depending on what part of Jersey you live in. Now, if you live in Newark, then you're probably going to come in contact with a bunch of Black businesses. But be it from Central Jersey, it's the suburbs. I was around a lot of Indians. Like that wasn't our brown people, you know. Like it was a little different. So I went to Miss Pat, and I'm more of a I'm not much of a salon goer. But I'm more of a get your hair done between somebody's legs, sitting on the pillow in the basement or in the house or wherever at somebody's house. Like that's my bag. I like every that you can give me that any day. But Miss Pat, she was doing my hair probably from 5th grade till I went off to college, and she would straighten my hair with the hot comb, and I remember it was a big thing that for me, my mom was very specific about not letting us have a perm early because it messed up her hair. So she wouldn't we would beg for a perm for years, and then she finally let us do it when I was in 8th grade. So from 8th grade to freshman year of college, I had a perm, and after I went from this pet to the perm, but the point is, like our hair. Growing up around people that don't share our hair, it's really hard because you're kind of constantly comparing yourself to those girls, and you're like, well, why come my hair don't do that? How come my hair doesn't do this? And I'll say this, I wanted really long hair. I had an obsession with long hair and having long hair, and I was like, my hair, and people used to think that my hair was long, and I used to say that it was black girl long. And it was like, it's not long for real, it's just black girl long, you know? It's like, it was like right here, straight. So it's like, oh, this is my little legs right here, and I'm doing something. No, I wasn't satisfied with that. I was like, I need my hair to be long. And as soon as I embraced my most natural hair, which has been my locks since 2015, I've had my locks. It's the longest my hair has ever been. I've never had hair this long. And my grandmother, now, today, when I first started my locks, she was like, you want me to pay to get your hair done? It's like, no, Grandma, it's done already. Now she's like, oh, what? Can I get some of your hair? What? You gonna put some of that on my head? I'm like, what? She said, that's all your hair? Yes, every time, Grandma. This is all my hair. So it's like, I mean, we have those moments. I think now, because we're more aware of what our hair actually means to us and the psychological impact of our hair, it's way different than like when you look back at those memories and we were thinking like what we were thinking and wanting the things we were wanting and being like wanting to be like white people and not realizing that that's exactly what we want, but we're deluding ourselves into thinking like this is normal. Like I just want, I want long straight hair because that's normal for me, right? Like a normal look for a black woman. And it's normal in our country, but it's not necessarily normal for our hair. This is the most natural state your hair could be in. I don't do nothing in my hair. I wake up like this. Okay. Like, thank you. The moment I could not have to worry about what's going on with my hair, dear God, I was like, why didn't I do this years ago? Like, I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the hair journey. I'm grateful for books like this coming out. Like, I'm just grateful that we are able to look at ourselves in this way now, because not everybody has come here yet. The other countries have not come here yet. Like, it seems like we lead the charge in the mindset shifting of colonization in a lot of respects. And it's like, I'm really happy that we are leading that charge in decolonizing our hair and decolonizing everything, but especially our hair. Because we can't keep passing this on to the next generation. Like, these little girls can't grow up with these complexes like we've had for the last 400 years. Like, we can't perpetuate this. So, I'm done with my soapbox. But
Thank you. Thanks for sharing.
yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting how the stories that we're told we categorize in 3 different parts. Is there a side person? Is the next side? Is the side person next? So with these stories that were coming up during these writing sessions of what is your early memory, we were able to divide it into parts. The first part of this book is called Edge Control. Basically, in what ways did our parents or teachers or society try to control our hair? Literally in edge control. And so Dr. Yellie's chapter was in that first part. So you can go to the next slide. And then these are some of the contributing authors. This is Whitney. So everybody submitted a childhood photo and what they look like now. And so really speaking to that transition, that we can have some of these very challenging early memories, but in terms of developing and growing to embrace who you are and your hair. So this is Whitney. She's a professor at American University, a broadcast journalist, and so she was on the news for years and had to navigate her professional identity with having natural hair. So at first straightening her hair, then her hair falling out, wearing wigs, and then growing locks in front of the camera. And the love and the hate that she got from wearing those styles. The next slide. Okay, next slide. The second part was length check. So Dr. Danielle shared part of her story, which was in part 2, that focused on length. But I also want to tell a little bit from my book. So it's funny, being a psychologist, I know everybody else's story, but rarely do I get to tell my own. Like, I'm a really good listener, like, But for me to share a little bit about mine, my chapter 5 is called Longest Hair in the Class. It was a competition, y'all. I don't know if anybody else. Well, listen to my paragraph or 2 and tell me if you had these. Maybe it was just in New York. So I love the range between Chicago and Louisiana. I'm a New Yorker, so I'll share the New York part. Stretching of curly and coiled hair was the black girl playground pastime and lunchroom activity. Taking out braids and unraveling twists held by colorful clips on the monkey bars while being watched by paraprofessional staff was an everyday affair. This process needed to be observed carefully by a quorum of girls to make sure there were no extended back leans that would make their hair appear to be longer down the back. Coats had to be removed for this process for accuracy and consistency to make sure the hair laid as flat as possible on the back. Each entrant had to remain completely still and stiff. The fragile ends of the very longest strands were grasped with the shrimpy fingers of 7- and 8-year-old melanated hands. The marking of the line was finalized with a deep and lingering poke to the back to kinetically demarcate length to the blinded contestant. This was a fair and regulated contest. Black girls that had gone through the exalted rite of passage to chemical relaxers expected additional inches from the stretching, but would get surprised as the weeks went by that their hair seemed to be getting shorter due to breakage from the chemicals. Black girls with beaded braids or extensions would have to forfeit their position until all adornments and added hair was removed. This sport was cutthroat, as everyone wanted the coveted position of having the longest hair in the class. All right, did anybody else have that competition? That okay, thank you, Dr. Hodge. You gotta pull it back like you can't tilt. And yeah, it's interesting that this was something that all of us did and we thought was normal, but why were we spending our lunchroom time or our playground time pulling on each other's hair to see how long it was. So there definitely needs to be more psychological research around this need for long hair. This is one of our contributing authors, Faith. She's out of Philadelphia. She's a cosmetologist. And so she tells a narrative in part 2 about having really long hair and being teased because of that. She's mixed race and having this navigation of length as a mixed race Black woman, and navigating how people would try to always pull her hair out to see how long it was. And so that's chapter 4. The next slide. Next slide. Oh, that's me, y'all. So this was me in first grade. I did have some inches. Right, Andrew, that's my cousin right there. I had long hair when I was little, right? I had long hair. And then this was me at New York Fashion Week a few weeks ago trying to pose that. Next slide. Oh, and this was my elementary school class. So do you all see me in it? I'm right there.
Up in the middle.
Yeah, that's me right there. So you can see the composition. People sometimes are like, did you grow up with white people? I'm like, no. Like this was legitimate my elementary school class. White teachers, but not white classmates. Next slide. I'm like, wait. All right. How about I ask you 2 more questions? I want to be very clear that these are some top scholars in the field, like in terms of education in African history and modernity. Dr. Yelly, can you speak to what, I guess, the role of mothering in hair and this concept of modernity that you speak to?
Hi, everybody. So my research is about how we can look at cultural institutions and practices in Africa and find out more about how enslaved African women resisted chattel enslavement across the Americas, not just in the US, based on the things, again, the cultural practices they brought from home. And after I finished that project, I focused on the Akan women in what is now Ghana. After I finished that project, I started really thinking about the deeper dynamics of what was going on in my research. And one of the things that we all know now about chattel slavery, what separates from all other systems of servitude that we've learned about in history, is that it is a dehumanizing system. It is built on the idea that those who are enslaved are no longer considered human beings. They have no human rights. They're not considered human beings according to the letter of the law. Socially, culturally, politically, no human standing. And so one of the things that I saw enslaved women doing when they are ready to fight, resist on any level is stuff with their hair. Definitely. So one of the things that I'll just put on the table is, it is not just that our hair is different from straight hair. It is that it's resistant. And it has been a part of our resistance for a long time. So I'll come back to that. But modernity is a theory that was developed by several Black women scholars, way smarter than me, and from across the African world and the diaspora, to talk about how African people, as the builders of the modern age, right? The modern age is essentially built on our backs, right? It funds Western Europe. And also like the idea of motherhood in building the modern age. The idea is that this is what brought us through. This is what made our human lives and our recognition of our own humanity sustainable through all of the horrors of that time period. Part of what makes us human in the African worldview is having a mother. And so I saw different practices of enslaved women mothering each other, people who were not their biological children, right? We never had the luxury of like being raised and living amongst the woman who actually physically gave birth to us, but we would find mothers to again reinforce our humanity in these dehumanizing conditions. And so one of the practices of modernity or mothering is doing someone's hair. It shows that you have pride as a human being, right? It goes back to our identity in Africa related to hair and how your hair indicates your status. Dr. Akia talks about this quite a bit in her research. In Africa, African societies, your hairstyle can indicate whether you were married or not. It can indicate your standing as a priest. It can indicate certain traumatic experiences you've been through and how you overcame those things. It tells a story about your life on so many different levels. So if you come over here and someone says you're not a human, you're a beast of burden, someone stopping to take the time to do your hair, or you walking around having the nerve to have a hair that speaks, is an expression of your humanity, right? And so it is in and of itself a form of resistance. And I think that when we see these Black women and girls in schools and in workplaces who are just daring to just let the hair be how it is, or to also wear styles that are a part of our cultural traditions, when we see that, we're not just looking at its Black ways of being. It is also that it's visual decolonization. They're forcing whiteness to see them as humans on their own terms. And sometimes whiteness does not enjoy that. And whiteness responds as it does with all kinds of punitive measures, right? Laws and policies and suspensions and firings and all those other things. And so modernity really is a very important theory, but it is very much a part of our praxis. It is very much a part of our ethic. And so what I have taken away from my research is trying to get us to think about the question in our own lives, in our organizations, if we're activists, which many of us in this room are, who are your mothers? And who are you mothering? And if you ain't being a mother to someone in your community, figure out how to become one. If you're not providing for those basic human needs and showing and reflecting and mirroring someone's humanity back to them, get to work. And if you don't have a mother, maybe you're struggling with something, right? Like maybe you need to find some folks to mother you or identify the people who have supported you in those ways. And this is not tied to gender, by the way. Anyone can mother, right? And we all need mothering. So that's the connection.
And then it's interesting because Laid to the Side has a sister. Strong Black Girls. So Danielle and I, this is our second book together. And Danielle, Dr. Danielle Fugo, can you speak to the creation of Strong Black Girls and why with your education research, Strong Black Girls and Laid to the Side needed to be birthed?
Oh, definitely. Good question. And thanks for asking because I do, yeah, so this is a book in reference. We do have them available here. So once we've concluded, we would appreciate your support in reading about some of these very interesting stories of scholars and women who've gone on to become professors. But these are stories that we don't take lightly, that folks have shared them with us, and it's our hearts are full, so. But just talking a little bit about my research background, so I specifically look at the ways in which African American Black women and girls navigate educational institutions, and looking more at what are the features of said institutions that sort of force us into this choreography or this dance or this navigational process. And so I'm really interested in ways that some of the features in the schooling systems and structures that give way to this. And, with that being such a broad question, I mean, I know my story and the stories in this book, but with that being, part of my curiosity, this was sort of a broad call for people to share their experiences in education. And in that sharing process, of course, because we're scholars, we pulled out themes, right? And so those themes became chapters. And so one of the themes that we keep seeing over and over and over in the research and even here is just, Black women's, giving voice to their experiences, specifically as it relates to how we've been discriminated against as it relates to our appearance, right? And so I think that really warranted just coming together to collaborate again on how we can give voice to these narratives, to these stories. Otherwise, we take it to the grave. Our daughters won't know, our mothers don't know, our mothers don't have it. And so I think one of the larger sort of the larger vision behind these works for me, and I think for most of the women that we've talked to or been in community with about these books, is that we need these platforms. We need them, whether they come in this form of a book, but we have to find a way to continue to allow people the space to give voice to their experiences. Because if we don't know about them, then they didn't happen. People will tell us that there's no way this is true. There's no way Zuleika Patel, like that doesn't happen in South Africa, right? So there's hundreds of Zuleikas, right? And we know these stories that have been so graciously shared don't happen in isolation. Like these aren't just one-off stories. They're unfortunately they're bittersweet because they are what bonds us, but we also don't get enough opportunities to be in community about these stories and to make meaning about how it's impacting our individual lives. And so for me, I think it's really critical that we continue this journey of storytelling, because at its core, that's what it is, and that's who we are as people. That's this whole establishment here is about storytellers and people telling their story. And so they're very blessed and honored to have an opportunity to create those platforms. And I'm hoping, I'm affirming right now that we will someone in this room, folks who have joined us today, will find the courage and bravery to connect to any platform that they can to share. So I just want to offer that.
Thank you. We gotta have a third, fourth, and fifth volume of these books coming out. So
We need some volunteer editors.
yeah. So it's interesting. Danielle and I experimented with Strong Black Girls being published through a publishing house, specifically Columbia University Teachers College Press. And then late to the side, we decided to make it self-published. So this is our own product that no one else told us what we could put and couldn't put in there. So it's much more intimate and raw. Maybe it has a typo. I don't think so. But we had an editor, but really got to craft and shape. I'm assuming it's like mothering these words in that way. So I don't have children, but I have books. The next slide. All right, and then chapter 3 was on part 3 was on deep conditioning. I want to ask a psychology joke. Wait, go back to that last slide. I want to tell a psychology joke. Why did Pavlov have such luscious hair?
What?
Because he conditioned it.
Oh, shit.
That was good. Come on, psychology.
That was good. That was good.
I tried. I won't give up my day job. Next slide. This is Dr. Kenesha Rowe. She is also at American University. She's probably come to Sankofa a few times. Has the most beautiful locks. But in her chapter, which is the last chapter of the book, she talks about her college experience of growing locks, where to the point some of her professors staged interventions like, "Are you okay?" Because they were so concerned that, she came with straight long hair to class one day and the next had chopped it off and had little twists, and they were really trying to send her to the counseling center for going natural. So it's a really humorous story with musical lyrics that she even includes in there for specific references. So a great and funny chapter. You'll notice that some are very emotional, some are funny, some are angry, some are really heartwarming. So it's such an emotional symphony of stories around hair. The next slide. The next slide. I should have had. So it's really important for us to have this historical understanding, but I think what the book does in particular, it archives the 80s, 90s, and 2000s really well. in terms of getting that unique time that's not in our history books per se, but our own lifetime of memories and history. So it tells it from these scholars. Like half the people in the book have a PhD, so it's interesting to see how they construct these narratives. But I want to be mindful of time, and we can. What's opposite? Yeah.
It's 7:46.
Yeah. Okay. So let's open up the floor for questions. So if you have questions about education, around history, modernity, psychology, psychotherapy, I'll open up the floor to ask us questions about the book or our fields or all of that.
Preguntas.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. First of all, I'm just so excited that y'all are doing this, and I just wanted to say that hearing the stories, I've read it, but hearing y'all talk about it out loud, like I don't know if there's an audio version, but I love the enthusiasm. But I am a school psychologist, and I work a lot with Black girls. I'm really. I think I told Dr. Pia this. I said sometimes I feel bad because I don't think I know enough sometimes about my own Black hair, and I deal a lot with little Black girls who have questions or thoughts. But as we think about like just their overall self-esteem and how they see themselves, are there anything that you think would be helpful? Because I would like to definitely share this with some of my girls. But is there thoughts of what I could be doing to be helpful to them, especially with just hair care or just their self-esteem? I just haven't had any books that I feel like that really talks about hair in this way, and I feel like sometimes they don't know that adults, and we all were children at that point and had those experiences. So just your overall thoughts, because I'm like, I know we give this, but I'm like, the kids, I really would need just your input or your thoughts on
Testing. Great question, by the way. So it's interesting because there has been sort of this increased sense of awareness, or I would say a heightened awareness around Black girls' experiences, hair experiences in schools. And I think a lot of that, at least from what I've been hearing from teachers in service and pre-service teachers, is that during the pandemic, of course, everybody was online, and some of the rationale behind some of the students not wanting to come back were, I'm being bullied, and why am I being bullied? Because of my hair and these things. So I think that really sort of brought to light, or brought to, to our awareness that these types of things were happening, but more specifically, Black girls were being affected by that type of bullying in a very specific way, different from Black boys. And so that to me was something that I've seen teachers begin to start to think about. But I also believe, and we were just talking about this before we started the talk here, is that in the pre-service teacher world, there's not a lot of, like, even before a teacher is deployed into the actual classroom space, in the pre-service preparation process, there's not a lot of content that's specific to what, particularly for teachers who are teaching in urban, that's a euphemism for Black, brown, but, so there's not a lot around or specific emphasis on the way, the schooling process impacts Black girls. And so I think there's a lot to be said at the preparation level for folks like us who are, in company in that company, to provide and advocate for more literature for teachers to, at that juncture, start to learn about the history, start to learn about the types of students that they'll actually be in front of, And I think now we've sort of broken down the silos between school counselors, therapists, teachers. Now we see, that we all need to work together. Like we have to be in communication with each other. And so I do also want to acknowledge the barriers for, school counseling period. Like there's obviously just deep disparities when it comes to the need, right? So there's not a lot of, there's obviously more needs than counselors. And so I'm thinking about what types of conversations need to happen to sort of supplement counselors who are already overwhelmed, who are already, getting, stories from students. And so how to just let some of these types of materials stand in the gap and be something that people can organize around as teachers in the actual classroom space, maybe building leaders facilitating things like this that teachers can talk about and have an opportunity to share. And at that point, teachers need to feel compelled to also share their own stories and to just bring awareness around, hey, I'm working with these colleagues and these are their experiences. And so I think the conversations are slowly bubbling up, and I think people are realizing that there's a natural connection here between who needs to be in communication about the overall mental health of Black girls, like who needs to be in the room, who needs to be sharing the story. So yeah.
Look, you just gave me a whole nother plan.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Okay. You guys talked a lot about how Black hair is perceived in white spaces, but I wanted to know a little bit how you felt about how we as Black people perceive our own hair and how we accept certain styles more than others.
Hi. Is it on? I think so. My story takes place in Black space. All of those segments of my story, and I would say, and this, I'm not on the psychology end of the spectrum, but Neely Fuller says if you don't understand white supremacy, everything else will confuse you, right? So I would say, to a great degree, we're going back to the decolonization conversation. So much of what we see as Black aesthetics has been dominated by white aesthetics. And so when we're having conversations about even what's acceptable within natural hairstyles, we're still having a lay your edges conversation. We're still having you gotta have the waves. It has to be smooth in a certain way. It has to still kind of even texturally reference something looser and straighter. And so it's a spectrum. It's a sliding scale of acceptability. And at the same time, there is a reverence for what is naughty and just free form and nappy. And there's that conversation that has never quite left us. I think in Black space, the goal should be to amplify that conversation and continue to tell the stories about where that has been important and why that has been important. But also, I try to be less judgmental about, and even within myself, right, about how I'm still trying to decolonize, and that's a process, and have patience with ourselves as we kind of work through those things. I think one of the things that has caused me to be excited about the internal conversation about Black hair is that it is so diverse. And we have looked all kinds of ways from the beginning of time, right? And so I've come to a place of kind of just generally accepting the creativity and the African approach that we even have to how we do straight hair. And also looking at what African aesthetics have been, there is something about neatness and orderliness and the mathematics of hair that has always been a part of who we are. So sometimes I think we even get that confused when we're like, they're just trying to be white by part and making sure their parts are neat, right? Well, if you're not a part of a certain tradition or you're not Rasta and you want parts, it doesn't mean you're trying to replicate whiteness. There's a neatness in your aesthetic that might be also ancestral. So I think we should just allow it to be complicated, but always be vigilant about the self-hatred and the whiteness that can creep in, that is literally the ocean we're swimming in, and just learn how to backstroke when we need to support one another and to find common ground. That makes sense.
And
Mhm.
it's braids underneath them sew-ins. Braids. Braids underneath them sew-ins. It be braids. Yeah.
This is a little bit of a segue, I think, because my question was going to be based on like your scholarship and your hearing other people's stories. I was curious, like, about you guys, how that's transformed your own either perception of yourselves or even your hair care practices. Because I think a lot of times, me knowing other people, like we talked about the student where she was like, I'm doing something different. She came up her hair, like it was whatever transformation inside of her was reflected in her hair. So I was just curious if you guys noticed that about yourselves or how maybe some of your own research and scholarship has changed you.
So what?
I've enjoyed being a part of this book and a part of this process. I've known Dr. Afia for a very long time, and I've had the pleasure of editing a lot of her work, which has exposed me to so many new ideas and people thinking about hair from so many different angles. Even like, it caused me to review my life and like the good, the bad, and the ugly. Really, literally. Even like not wanting to go to gym classes, I don't want to sweat out my press, and like how that affects, even our exercise, Black girls' relationship to health and exercise and PE at school and all these things. And I think it has allowed me to feel like I'm a part of a horizontal community of Black women who have similar experiences. Like I knew it, but it's so different to feel like you're actually in the community. And I hope that this book gives people that sense that you're really, really not alone. And because my sense of my belonging is vertical. It's like ancestors. So like one day I chopped my hair off and I had an undercut, like all the way shaved all the way around. And I was like, yeah, I did the hairstyle that the women would cut their hair into when they were about to rebel. I was gonna use profanity in Jamaica in 1760. They would just shave all around and then like stack it up into almost like a point at the top of their hair. And I was like, yeah, like that's why I'm doing this. Like I'm in that group, and I relate to them, and this is like a form of resistance, and I'm digging into my warrior energy, right? But I think I sometimes miss being on the horizontal with like my living sisters, and it's been very wonderful to also, I think, even with Dr. Afia, like I think this book forces us to get really raw and really real with ourselves. Like I'm like, no, Dr. Afia, you got like 3A hair, or like mixed race people in the book, and like everybody. I think I assumed because there was a texturism privilege that they were not feeling my blues. They weren't experiencing problems the way I was experiencing problems with my 4G hair, right? And so, it's great. And so I think that also definitely helped me to hear. Yeah, I got the Nigerian hair. It's music, right? It's been trying to music forever. So, and I think it just helped me to like be more in community with my sisters who I just assumed didn't have the same struggle or a struggle at all. Yeah.
My feelings are hurt. 3C.
I know that's right. Get it right.
Yeah, it's a great question because this book feels much more intimate than all the other articles because before I was analyzing what other people's hair experiences were, having them fill out all these surveys, but then for me to actually take it myself and really sit and think critically about how my identity is expressed through my hair. It's interesting because I told you all that I was a student at Howard, but I also was a professor at Howard. And I didn't have the most positive experience. Why? Because when I would speak to the head of the psychology department at the time, I got feedback that literally my research was too cutesy. That was the word that was used. And so I internalized that to some degree, and I'm like, I won't curse because I'm not a curse, but at this, I'm going to make my whole my own sub-discipline of psychology that focuses on hair. And I really went out and published like a bunch of stuff to be able to legitimize it. But I still think back, why did I need the head of the psych department to legitimize what I was going through? And even as someone who was unsuccessful in getting tenure, that even made me question, was it the topic that I was studying? But I know that it's true. If it has this meaning and significance to me, if it's something that can have people crying and moaning and laughing, like I know it's a psychological experience. So by having the writing group and it coming up even as I wrote instead of just analyzing data, that it was really more evidence to me that this needs to be deeply understood. I'm sitting here just thinking about the people I've seen on this stage, like Dr. Welsing, Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, and so I oftentimes feel her energy and spirit to take her understanding of psychology around race and racism, but to even make it more broadly connected to hair, because that's what we literally feel that in our daily experiences. So for me, I feel vulnerable, but I feel like just like in therapy, you can only take your clients as deep as you're willing to go yourself. So I feel like I've been able to explore my own story more. And so Dr. Parham, in his book, Counseling Persons of African Descent, he says that a key to mental health is self-knowledge. So I need to continue to study my own stories to be an effective clinician and listener.
Wow. So that's a great question. I think for me, it's a lot of it has been, I guess, forcing myself to face what I'm studying and getting comfortable being uncomfortable and not shying away from when it gets tough, when it's like, oh, I don't want to think about this. I don't want to have to think about this because this brings up so many emotions. But instead of running away or just being like, oh, well, I'm gonna get in my, my scholarship bag and I'm gonna break it down to what it needs to be. When in fact, so much of the breaking down process, so much of what is missing is when we're trained to be scholars, when we go to school, learn all these things, we're trained to set aside who we are. Like that is a vital part. Like that is the breaking process of set this. You are over here, your little girl self, your little black girl self. Put her over here in this little box, and then grown woman comes and does the scholarship work while the little girl is sitting over here. So I think what this project or being in the company of having the privilege to create something that is scholastically adjacent, I'm calling it. I mean, we're categorizing it as creative nonfiction, but just the liberation that comes without having to every other thing be in your head, but be in your heart, like who that person is. And I think for us as Black women, scholars or creators or writers, I think that is absolutely necessary thing that we have to do. Because if we don't do it or have the outlet to do it, then we start to think, we start to abandon the little girl in the box. She never comes with us on our journey. She never, gets to see what we write. She never knows because she's over there. So I think these works have given opportunity to bring her out, even though she's, I don't like unpacking her because she got some stuff. Mm-hmm. So just like being comfortable with that and be like, okay, I'm gonna take you by the hand. I'm gonna show you what I'm doing over here, and you're gonna inform me about what you want to write about. And like, oh, okay, you want to write about the summer of Louisiana? We can do that. This is what happened. So just being open and willing to break something, Yeah.
You all, this is beautiful. You all are beautiful. I want to thank each and every one of you for coming out tonight and sharing space, listening to our stories, taking Ubers and traveling from West Virginia in the house. Just for this. members, to friends, to mentees, to Black psychologists, former students, and sister friends. Thank you all so much. And so to give you all a special treat, if you purchase the book tonight, okay, so we gotta give the deal. Okay, yeah. If you purchase the book tonight, we will give you all a free tote bag.
Yes. of your choosing with
Of
one of
your
the colors featured here,
choosing.
purple,
Ah.
pink, or
Oh.
coordination.
And for the first 10 people who purchase the book, not to create any stampedes, we have some free hair products.
Oh!
That
is positive. Yeah.
And so, I assume Christina, should we do a signing here or should we be like outside in the
Here,
front? Is
y'all can
here?
stay right
Okay.
there to sign, and everybody can. You know what? Let me.
Yeah, yeah.
Give us the logistics. sis.
Thank y'all so much for joining us. Let's give them a round of applause. Now, you know Black women can get up here and talk forever. I know we can do it, but it's fine. 'Cause this is an amazing topic. Like, I mean, we can all relate to this, right? Like, so, we're going to Dr. Fia, Danielle, and Sheila will be signing books over here. Back there, you can purchase your book. You can purchase Strong Black Girls directly from Danielle. You can purchase Ladies to the Side at the desk back there. And we have the totes as well back there for you. I also need to announce, because, Haile will get on me if I don't. This event is coming up next week, or next month actually, with Lady Mataka. If y'all are not familiar, she is like one of those legendary Black women writers that you should probably know about. But if you don't know, don't blame yourself. They be hiding stuff. So, Lady Mataka will be here Friday, July 12th at 7 p.m. for her book, Return of the Kings. And on Saturday, July 27th at 6 p.m., we have a photography book discussion. And I don't want to mess up this brother's name, so I'm not going to say it. But we have a photography book discussion on July 27th here at Sankofa as well. Please pull up to us online, because as you can see, we set this up. People are online. Thank you to the 60 people who are watching right now. Yes, 60 people are watching online, and we appreciate you. Y'all can buy the book online now. It's sankofa.com. Thank you.
You can purchase this from
Yes.
Columbia University Teachers College Press or Amazon.
Yes, and Sankofa has this book as well.
Oh,
You have
Yes,
that?
of course.
Tonight we are selling, Danielle is selling her.
Oh, gosh.
But thank y'all so much. Let's, Jazz Night this Friday. Oh, and also we have Jazz Night this Friday. We got a lot going on here at the Cove. If you don't know, now you know.
Is it gonna be here?
Yeah, we have, if y'all don't know.
So we have a series that we're doing every other Friday, Jazz Night, with the group David White and Edge Theory. So David White, he did this the soundtrack. He's the one who did the score for the movie Sankofa. So he has a band, and he's gonna be doing that every other week. So it's gonna be this Friday. And then Sunday, we have a series called Gaza on Our Mind, which is basically an open mic to recognize what's going on in Gaza. So if people have poetry or songs or art that they want to share with the community, Sunday would be a day to do that. So just check our website, sankofa.com, check our Instagram and everything, Sankofa DC. So thanks.
Thanks, y'all.